Welcome, everyone. On behalf of CEBRI, I want to welcome you all to this webinar today. Today, we are going to discuss the results of the 20th National Congress of the Communist Party in China. Our focus would be the substantive messages coming from the Congress. And we are privileged to have here with us Shan Huang. Shan Huang is the Deputy Managing Director and Editorial Board Member of the Beijing-based Caixin Media, the Chinese equivalent of The Economist, as most people know, and it's a kind of daily media that we read on a regular basis if we want to follow China in detail. Shan Huang has been in charge of Caixin's foreign desk for 17 years, reporting on domestic, economic, and political situations and external relations. He was also a visiting fellow with the Blavatnik School of Government at the University of Oxford in the Trinity term of 2018. He served as a senior research associate with the Kellogg Institute for International Studies at the University of Notre Dame for the period of August 2018 to May 2019. Thank you very much, Shan, for being with us today. Before we start, I just want to thank the sponsor of the Asian program at CEBRI, Banco BOCOM BBM. Shan, I think we could start by you making a few general observations about the Congress.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Great to see you again. I'm in China and you are in Brazil. Hope we can meet each other in person. So I think definitely the last week is one of the most important political season for Chinese politics, but beyond. And we have seen a new lineup of Chinese Standing Committee of Politburo and the whole 24 members of Politburo and also the Central Committee members. Other than that, definitely we have noticed several new concepts and several priorities coming out of the Congress. So I just take advantage of 5 minutes to draw attention to several new concepts or new ideas coming from this Congress. The first one I want to emphasize is the Chinese style modernization. I think when it comes to this overarching concept, I think there are several pillars or several components within we call the Chinese style modernization. Number one is I think it's a CCP led. The second is it's about high quality development. The third is a full process people's democracy. And the fourth is about common prosperity. And the fifth is about coordinating material and the spiritual needs. And finally is about the creating harmony and between people and the nature. So I would argue that because I think a lot of foreigners are familiar with the concept of socialism with Chinese characteristics, right? And so my sense is that in the days to come, maybe you will see more frequent occurrence or frequent references of a Chinese style modernization, this concept. And the concept socialism with a Chinese characteristics will be kind of reduced in its frequency and in public debate. So definitely I want to elaborate on the concept a little bit during our conversation with Mr. Ambassador. The second thing I really want to draw your attention to is about the comprehensive national security. I think when it comes to these national security priorities, I think everybody now, particularly I think international investors and the stock markets across the world, really try to interpret what the comprehensive national security means. And a lot of explanation is that now, from the party's perspective, now development, so China may not continue to pay attention to the traditional economic growth, right? So a new era, it means that in which national security and ideology will be a higher priority than maintaining robust growth. I think this is a very widely circulated explanation of the we call comprehensive national security. But I would say this concept definitely now is a really umbrella concept, and it's a carry multifold meanings. For example, at least I can definitely summarize at least the three components of a comprehensive national security. The number one is really about supply chain resilience or supply chain security. We have noticed the tech war and the trade war between U.S. China, and we have heard repeatedly from Chinese top leaders about how to maintain homegrown and indigenous innovation, right? Development of semiconductor and the other advanced technologies. Because if you look at against backdrop of recent the U.S. unilaterally decoupling from China's semiconductor markets, and also they call the Chip and Science Act. Definitely, I think all these American domestic bills trying to decouple China from the rest, particularly the Western-dominated semiconductor chips manufacturing and the designing industry. So I think China at the moment has no choice but to really rely heavily upon its indigenous innovation and its domestic platform to really stimulate, increase the proportion of his homemade semiconductor and chips. So this is really about the supply chain security. The second is really, I think, is about the food, and the third is about the energy security. I think the Russia's war in Ukraine definitely give the world, and particularly China, a harder lessons that if you cannot achieve independence in energy supplies and also food supplies, you cannot really win even a regional battle. So I think the energy and the food security now remain the two priorities for China's development goal for the years to come. Another national security concern is really financial security. And I think this is another lesson China draw from Russia's invasion in Ukraine, is that if your financial system is still vulnerable to the US dollar denominated international financial system, you almost have no means to escape from the US and the Western imposed sanctions. So I think definitely that's why China really tried to build up or fortify its financial defense, right? For example, we're talking about the CIPS, we call the cross-border interbank payment system. CIPS is kind of equivalent of the SWIFT system, but definitely I think when it comes to its scope, when it comes to influence, when it comes to its members countries, definitely it's not on par with the SWIFT system, but definitely China really want to fortify its moat, or we call the financial moat, to defend the potential and the future financial sanctions or financial sanctions on China in the case of some extremely scenario, for example, Taiwan cross strait situation. So I think definitely we will see that the comprehensive national security now is really a buzzword in the years to come. But having said that, I would definitely say we cannot really rule out the importance of the economic growth or economic development. For example, I just quote a sentence from the Party's Congress Work Report, is that development is the party's top priority in governing and rejuvenating China. For without solid material and technological foundations, we cannot hope to build a great modern socialist country. So we know, according to China's midterm, the long-term goal, by 2035, China will make basically we could build a socialist modernization by 2035. Now, by 2049, we will try to build China into a modern socialist country. I think all these two goals definitely need a very strong economic foundation, economic performance. For example, now China's per capita GDP is around 12,000 US dollars. So in order to becoming a socialist modern society by 2035, China at least needs to double its per capita GDP to 24 or 25,000 US dollars. So without a solid, a sustained economic performance, I don't think China can say, hey, I have achieved the midterm and the long-term goals, with the still, falling the mid-income trap. So I don't think anybody can really boast about its achievement without this solid, I would say hard data performance. So so based on my observation, so let me a little bit trying to wade into about lineup. So I during my pre-webinar discussion with Mr. Ambassador, I really talking about the potential lineup of Chinese economic and the financial team, right? For example, I think a lot of people are, particularly overseas China observers, a little bit surprised by the new lineup, particularly number 2 guy in the Politburo Standing Committee, Mr. Li Qiang. We know he's the party secretary of Shanghai Chinese Economic and Financial Hub. Actually, before the Shanghai lockdown saga this spring, actually, I think Li Qiang enjoys a good reputation as a kind of business-friendly and pro-market economic hand, right? So, for example, under his watch, Shanghai established what we call the Science and Technology Innovation Board. We call the Stock Exchange, aiming to attract high-tech companies and innovative companies to go list on the stock exchange. And also under its weight, Tesla, the automaker, took only 10 months to deliver his first ever Model 3 model in 10 months. We call the Tesla Super Factory in Shanghai Industry Zone. So I think all his achievements actually were supervised by Party Secretary Li Qiang. So you cannot say because thanks to his mishandling of Shanghai pandemic, he's nobody and he cannot capable doing anything good. I don't think you can say that. So definitely, I think Li Qiang will be because his past experience in overseeing a lot of coastal provinces like Zhejiang, like Jiangsu, and Shanghai. I think definitely he enjoyed kind of a good reputation and the popularity among foreign business executives. So another definitely, let me give you some a rough runaway of the potential economic team, because we know actually this time we will see. I think this is maybe in the 40 years we have seen all the, including premier and the 4 vice premier will be gone of the party congress, right? Liu He will be gone, and Han Zheng will be gone, and the Premier Li Keqiang will be gone. But we will see definitely a totally new lineup of Chinese economic team and the State Council, and definitely we see it's logically saying that the Ding Xuexiang, the number 6 guy in the standing committee, will be taking the position of executive vice premier. And also the now NDRC director, Mr. He, Li Feng, could be the take the place of the Liu He in charge of Chinese the economic and financial matters. So I think if you look at the rough composition of a Chinese economic and financial team, so actually you can see most of them have decades experience in managing local economy and also the central agencies, central ministry, and I think those guys definitely are not totally strange faces for the foreign investors and the foreign business, right? And particularly, we know Mr. He definitely has been in charge of NDRC for a while, and he rose through ranks, in the coastal provinces. So Li Qiang, as I mentioned, that definitely is quite familiar faces in Chinese the economic statecraft. So I would say it's kind of, and yes, when it comes to the total shakeup of the State Council, but if you really look at the new lineup, I think most of all are economic hands and possess many years of economic management experience. So yes, I will stop here and just get to the dialogue session with the Mr. Ambassador.
Observations, we are going back to some of them during our question and answer part. let me start with the topic of ideology that you made reference to. It's impossible not to notice the strong ideological content of Xi Jinping's report to the Congress. He makes the point that Marxism is the framework under which China works. He says that China owes its success to the fact that Marxism works, but at the same time he talks a lot about theoretical innovation. And throughout his speech and his report, he made many references to what you also mentioned here, socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. And I think that this is what caused, in a way, the reaction to the Congress, to say, is China going too much into the ideological spirit? And then the question to you is does he make reference to ideology so strongly because it's his own conviction, or he's making concessions to some sectors of the party, or he's giving an alert to the new comers and to the new members, to the younger members, that Marxism and the ideological structure of the party should be there? How do you read this? Is there any message within the party?
I think if you look at the past decades of presidencies overseeing of a Chinese society and Chinese nation, so I think it came as no surprise that he's kind of a champion of a strong conviction of ideological purity, right? So I think when it comes to rampant corruption, and also a lot of party members really lose their convictions, right? For the economic reasons. So you can see definitely he's trying to, in his view, correct the course, right? We call it course correction. I think has been one of his hallmarks since he came into power in 2012, right? So I think the party building or party construction has been long time one of the signature projects of his hallmarks. So I think anti-corruption campaign or anti-corruption drive just part of his ideological purity campaign, right? So I think he definitely is kind of a man of a strong conviction and in the ideological purity, or we call ideological struggle. So definitely, if you really move this domestic pure ideological campaign to foreign affairs arena or diplomacy, you can see now the US-China rivalry is taken more, like the Cold War 2.0, because we know when it comes to a lot of people trying to draw parallel between the Soviet Union US rivalry with the current China-US rivalry. I think the one of the common thread putting those comparisons together is that if US-China rivalry is mostly more or less driven by ideological struggle, it definitely is look more like the first Cold War. But I will stop here because I think now today's world, particularly you guys living and working in Brazil, today's world definitely is not a bipolar world. Actually, we have seen multiple voices, like Southeast Asian countries, Latin American, and other Central Asian countries. So those countries, I think it's not necessary for them to take sides. So I think this is the most important variable, the most important, new phenomenon in so-called Cold War 2.0. So that means actually they are the other polars, the other strong economies or regional economy, they can really live their own way without worrying, plunge into the great power rivalry. I think this is the most important features of our new era, a new world politics. So yes, I'm not quite sure I answer your questions, but definitely we'll see China when it comes to domestic society and domestic policy, I think China definitely, compared to 10 years ago, compared to pre-New Era, definitely I think China's society will be more driven by the ideology. And we know the ideological purity or such campaign will definitely continue in the years to come. Yeah.
No, it's very clear what you're saying. Let me talk a little bit about the party. Xi Jinping's speech contains a severe criticism to the behavior of party members. He talks about bureaucratism, hedonism, extravagance. He even says that there are many people worried with the party's future, and that the only way to avoid the rise and fall of the party throughout times is to reform, or all the time to reform. And that's very strong, because the language is not a simple language. It's a very rigid language criticizing party members. What's your opinion about that? Well, why does it come? Does he want to unify the party with different ideas, or in a kind of discipline that he doesn't see in the party, or he's criticizing some specific groups that we can identify at this point?
Yeah, I think so. Actually, as I mentioned, that he's a strong believer of the party purity and the continuous of the party purification. We call it a rectification campaign, right? And so definitely, if you know, in China, we always, I think the year before last or last year, Chinese ruling party, the Communist Party, China just celebrated its 100th anniversary of its birth, right? So if you look at back the party history, particularly modern party history, you have seen few parties can really survive and prosper after 100-year ruling. For example, we talk about the Revolution Institution Party in Mexico, right? It's one of the you guys definitely know this better than I. So the one is longest serving ruling party in the world in Mexico. But in the year 2000, we know the party actually imploded, right, and loses a grip on power because I think internal strife, the factional strife, and also the rampant corruption. So definitely, I think President Xi learned a hard lesson from the past failure of the modern parties, for example, the Communist Party in Soviet Union and also the BRI in Mexico. So I think by emphasizing repeatedly the importance of purification, ideological purification and the rectification campaign, I think he's trying to convey the message that, because I think most people can have kind of fatigue, right? So for example, now you have a consolidated power, you don't need to worry about losing your grip on power. So why bother you continuously the ideological campaign? So let's get ahead and forget about the previous rectification campaign. But I think having emphasized the importance of the ideological struggle, I think he just tried to give the warning to the party members, the 69 million party members, that we cannot forget the importance. With quoting his word, right? The party purification campaign is always an ongoing process. No period time, no period. So I think the message is crystal clear in his sense that we cannot. The party building is always an ongoing process.
Okay, let's focus on the economy. I heard you saying that we should not overestimate the ideological content of the report, because the economy will always play an important role in Chinese Chinese development and in Chinese presence in the world. This is true. You also said that Li Qiang, the possible next prime minister, is someone who managed the Shanghainese economy. And he is naturally a market-friendly person, because you cannot run Shanghai without being a market-friendly person. And that there are a number of people who were connected to the economy, like regulators and members of economic organs that ascended in the party hierarchy, and they are going to play a role. Yet, when we read the report, Xi Jinping's report, we have the following impression. He recognizes that China has acute structural problems and huge imbalances. And he recognizes that, but he doesn't focus too much on the idea of reforms. You know, China has been talking of reforms for a long time, and he doesn't mention reforms. He mentions that the internal market is going to be important. He mentions the internationalization of the renminbi, but he expresses the view that, you know, it's industry, it's manufacturing, and more than industry and manufacturing, it's technology creation and development that matters when we look at the economy. So it's a very pragmatic approach to the economy. Do you read this as an abandonment of the idea to reform and an insistence on the idea of investments to make the economy work?
So I think the simple answer is no. So the reason is that, so you look at the Party Congress, actually, let's talk about Party Congress. What's the Party Congress? Particularly, I think in twice a decade political event. So definitely, I think its number one task or number one job is trying to get already the whole party behind him and behind one common cause. That's a great rejuvenation of translation, and also instill the party discipline and the party governance into not senior members, but the rank and file 96 million Communist Party members and also 1.4 billion Chinese people. So I think it's really about kind of the, set up a goalpost, right? And say what we to achieve in the next 10 years, 5 or 10 years. I think it's really about the kind of, we can say ideological clarification, or we call the, the top priorities, instead of a repetition of a previously, we can say political cliche or repeatedly phrases like yes, I think definitely reform, opening up, definitely I think a basic principle. They'll say we will put the basic principle on the back burner. So I think now a lot of think tanks and the foreign-based China watchers, they're trying to draw a comparison between the number of references of one single words or one single phrases. For example, reform. A lot of say now reform just mentioned, for example, 5 or 3 times, while the comprehensive national security were mentioned 10 or 11 times. So they're trying to draw this rough comparison, to saying the party now put less premium on the reform opening up. Actually, I think it's more complicated. In actually, when it comes to the number of mentions of these concepts, because I emphasize again and again, I think the Party Congress is really about party governance, to about instill new concepts, to making people realize that this is a new era, and we must have a new guidance and new concepts to adapt ourselves to a new era. So instead of repeating what already, get used to concept like reform opening up, I think definitely because the limit space of the rhetoric, right? I think if you look at the written version is around 73 pages, around 35,000 Chinese characteristics. So you definitely cannot embrace or put all the concepts or important concepts into one single political document. So what you need to do just emphasize what's new and what's you think at the moment the critical important thing. So my sense is that for instance, and particularly I will draw your attention to his last paragraph in his the first plenum press conference, when he led the other 3 standing members onto a red carpeted stage and he say a few words to the 3,000 foreign and trans correspondents. So the last paragraph, I think he mentioned the importance of the Chinese. He said, I quoted him as saying that China will open its door wider and wider to the outside world, and we encourage you guys to visit China, visit different places in China, and reform and opening up. Definitely, we will adhere to. So I think he just want to send kind of reassuring if the international markets and the China observers are nervous about China's future and China's future course of action. So I think by saying these words, he's trying to send kind of a reassuring message to international investors, the international community, that China will stick to its already well-trodden path, but we will have some new elements, new components in the years to come. So I think definitely in a linguistic, parts of the language, definitely we always emphasize the later part of our sentence, right? We need to, at the moment, we need to pay extra attention to the new era, all the concepts I have emphasized: Chinese style modernization, the comprehensive national security. So, but that doesn't mean that it's a zero-sum game, right? So, national security definitely, at times, I think people say it will trump the importance of the economic growth. But I repeat again, is that you cannot achieve anything without a solid material and the technological foundation. Because if you really want to compete with the US, if you really want to become an innovation-driven economy, you cannot just rely upon rhetoric. You cannot rely upon propaganda people to elevate your nation status as the most innovation and the most attractive market in the world, right? You need also hard data and the numbers to really to give people, instill confidence in the people's minds. I think this is the key message. So anyway, I think we definitely see a lot of conflicting concepts, but I think it really takes time to a lot of efforts to reconcile those seemingly conflicting concepts and really look at what China has been put in place in the Party Congress. So just one observation from myself, I think if by the next, for example, one I think definitely if you look at the next months, so if it's a big if definitely. So if China can ease its COVID policy in the months to come to give kind of a stimulus to the economy, right? So I think maybe it represents a kind of the a change of Chinese positions, because we know the zero COVID policy actually will come at the expense of economic growth, right? And particularly, we know when you get a new subvariant of virus, therefore it's really hard to continue the zero COVID policy for the foreseeable future. So if we can really some kind of tweak or a small adjustment of a zero COVID policy, trying to elevate the importance of economic growth, I think that will be definitely send a more reassuring message to not just international investors, but also Chinese domestic constituents.
Yeah, I must say that there's an important message in Xi Jinping's speech saying that China is not going to go back to isolation and to the idea of being a country, far from the rest of the world. And I think this is a very strong message about the economy. Let me talk a little bit about the international scenario. Maybe we are going to extend 5 or 10 minutes our presentation if you have time, our discussion if you have time. Xi Jinping paints a somber international scenario. He says about the economy that the economy entered a period, the international economy entered a period of turbulence and change. And about the political scenario, he is even stronger in his language. He says that attempts to suppress and contain China may escalate at any time. And he talks about the potential dangers and that China should be prepared to deal with the worst case scenarios. The response is diplomacy with Chinese characteristics. That was the first time that I heard the Chinese characteristics, close to the word diplomacy. And he also says that China should accumulate power to exert international influence and shape the international reality. Is there a big change in the vision about foreign policy in China?
Well, so when President Xi mentioned we call it once a century transformation, right? I think he has the US-China rivalry in mind. So when it comes to the 40 years ago, when China opened up its door to outside world, I think the precondition for China's opening up is definitely the thawing of the relationship between Washington and Beijing. So actually, to be honest, I think when we talk about open door, it means open door to the US-led Western system. I think no doubt about this. We try to adapt the Western, technologies and some systems, all these the Western the model, for example, civil society concept and the democratic system. Anyway, so but facing we call it once a century transformation, I think actually I personally come up with a new concept about the second opening up. I talk about second opening up, I mean China will open store, not just the US, but the rest of the world, particularly the emerging economies or frontier countries like Brazil, like Southeastern Asian countries, and also some European countries. So when I talk about the second opening up, I think this is kind of a concept. I think it's in minds of Chinese leadership that because the US is determined to contain and thwart Chinese rise, so we had no choice but to turn to other countries to get what we need. For example, raw materials. I don't think that China can really achieve what we call the energy or food supply independence anytime soon. China is not Russia. We don't have a vast swaths of arable lands. We don't have sufficient reserves of fossil fuels and also the other, even we call it green fuels. So China have never ever achieved independence when it comes to food supplies, energy supplies. So the only way for China to exit from this kind of dilemma in the case of extreme scenario, I think is for China to get to have opened up its door to the other part of the world. So the world is not just all. For example, the US is not only game in town, right? So actually, you have multiple stakeholders. You have Brazil, you have Argentina, you have Mexico, you have Chile. So you can get raw material supplies, you can get the food supplies from those South American countries. So having that in mind, I think when China talking about it's a diplomatic, we call it the correction of course, I would say yes, definitely China will reconsider its opening up policy. But this time, I would say definitely China will divert more resources, energy to we call the non-American actors, right? So actually, one of my observations that when we talk about the concept West or Western nations, I think in the first place it's a misnomer. So actually, when it comes to specific policies or specific strategies, or even when it comes to your attitude toward one single trans companies, I think the the European capitals actually have a quite different view from Washington when it comes to specifics. Yes, they have a lot of things in common. For example, about human rights, about Chinese for example, state-owned subsidies for state-owned enterprises, and Chinese market access restrictions. Yes, they have their concerns, but having said that, definitely I think the Western capitals, European capitals, they have different policies, different initiatives when it comes to specifics. For example, the 5G technology, for example, about the third party, we call the third party cooperation, for example, in African countries, in other regions. So my general sense is that we will see China still open its door to outside world, but this time we will see China will more selective and more limited in its outreach to countries. It really depends on whether or not you guys are like-minded countries, or whether or not we share something in common. For example, we saw whether or not you support China's BRI or China's global development strategy or global development strategy. All these umbrella concept proposed by Xi in the past few years. So I think this will becoming kind of a very complicated period of time in international relations. But as I mentioned before, that today's world is a multipolar world, and not just US and China. Actually, there's enough sufficient space for the third party and the fourth party to live with each other. So I think this is a key feature of our modern day world order affairs.
Well, we have time for a last question, and this question is going to be about Taiwan. Very strong language in the president's report about Taiwan. He talks about gross provocation of external interference, intends to blackmail, contain, blockade, and exert maximum pressure on China. At the same time, Xi Jinping mentions that China has never promised to renounce the use of force and reserves the option of taking all measures necessary. My question is very simple. Was there a change in the attitude towards Taiwan after in the party's Congress, or it's a continuation of the previous policy?
Yes or no? I think definitely I would say in a week of Nancy Pelosi's visit and China's historical flexing its military might, I think a reunification with Taiwan, I think the timeline for unification with Taiwan is accelerated or is advanced, since against the backdrop of the past few months' situation. But if you look at China's recently published documents, for example, the white paper, the third white paper, right, since the century, the third white paper, and also the presidency's work report. So actually, I think China trying to walk back its harsh rhetoric toward Taiwan. So first and foremost, I think presidency and the white paper emphasize now peaceful unification with Taiwan still our top priority. Yes, we don't renounce to use force to take out Taiwan, but peaceful reunification still our top priority. And also during his work report, I think President Xi tried to send kind of olive branch to Taiwan, the majority of Taiwanese say our, the harsh words just for the pro-independence forces within the island, and also we call the international interference. I think he implies the US. Yes, so I think that he trying to tone down the previously, harsh words about Taiwan, and also try to lower the temperature across street. So my take on the Taiwan situation is that China will never ever go to war over Taiwan at a pace set by the other party. For example, I never ever believe that Nancy Pelosi visit will stir a war, a regional conflict, because any war scenario will be taking place in China's choice of timing and the places and the pace. So that means China will take initiatives to use what it views as the most appropriate approach to take over Taiwan by force or peacefully. So China will never ever allow himself to be dictated by the other country's agenda. For example, we're talking about 2024 U.S. presidential election. We're talking about the also Taiwan leaders election, and also the 2028 American presidential election. I don't think these timings really catch the essence of cross-strait relations, because I think Chinese principle is simple, that we need to take initiative. We cannot allow our agenda to be distracted or to be dictated by the third party. So definitely when China think now is the right moment, is the right time to take over Taiwan by force or peacefully, China will do it anyway. So I think this is the basic principle when it comes to the cross-strait relationship. So my sense definitely, in order to understand the cross-strait relations, we must have a better understanding, a better command of Chinese domestic priorities and the Chinese domestic agenda. So I prefer to say, for example, the next Party Congress in 2027, or even the Party Congress 2035, or any big event, marking kind of milestone here in China. So I think this kind of metric or goalpost will be served as more meaningful and more instructive ways to understand cross-strait Taiwan relations. So in a nutshell, so I think it's more a continuation than change when it comes to China's Taiwan policy. And I don't see any near-term, a war scenario taking place between Washington and Beijing over Taiwan. So if the Biden and the Xi summit really takes place in Bali Island next month, I would argue that definitely we actually have more differences than common grounds when it comes to Sino-US relations. But don't go to war over Taiwan. I think it's the bottom line between President Xi and President Biden. So I think as long as Biden is in the White House, I think he's a steady hand. He doesn't allow the war scenario to take place under his watch. But after that, definitely, I think if the Republican really take over White House or Congress, definitely he's trying to, become more aggressive across Taiwan Straits. But having said that, I don't think China will be definitely dictated by any government shuffle or congressional shuffle back in Washington D.C. China will, will take initiative and use what it views as the most appropriate timing and the places and means to get Taiwan issue resolved. So this is my interpretation of Taiwan situation.
Thank you. I could go on with this conversation for 1 hour more, but we have a time limit. So Shan, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you very much for your comments and clarifications. I want to thank the audience for staying with us for the whole webinar. To thank again our sponsors, Banco BOCOM BBM, and see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Have a good day.